Welcome to Beans and Breakdowns, a podcast dedicated to bridging the gap between specialty coffee and the heavy music community. On this episode, I'm joined by Haley Sliwa, roaster for Brewpoint Coffee in the Chicago, Illinois area. So grab a fresh cup of coffee and wake the fuck up! What's going on, Caffeinated Crew? Today I'm joined by Haley. They are a coffee roaster for Brewpoint Coffee, which is out of Elmhurst, Illinois. Mm-hmm. That's correct. I got that right. Okay. I have a bag right in front of me, but I realized it doesn't have any. Oh, it does. Okay. Elmhurst, Illinois. Haley, how are you doing this afternoon?
I'm good. I'm really good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Having a nice afternoon cup. It was a late morning for me, so this is my second one. I don't know about you, but yeah, I needed it.
Yeah. I'm still milking my first cup today.
Okay, good.
We're working through it. It's cold now, but it's good.
Do you like letting it kind of mellow out so you can taste all the nice flavors?
Yeah, it's like a point of disagreement in my coffee shop, like the temperature that you start your pour over at. I always start at 212. I want it starting at boiling. I want it to hurt me at first, and then kind of let it cool down to get the full spectrum. That's how I prefer to do it. But
so you do straight off the boil?
Yeah.
Oh wow. See, I mean that is definitely a good argument because at work I let it simmer. Like I let the coil rest, not the coil, the kettle rest for a minute or so because I don't have a temperature gauge. But at home, 205.
I hear you, but I'm a 212 person. We did like a side by side. My coworkers are not going to laugh at me because this is always the back and forth. We did like a side by side of a pour over. We have these. They're used for holding creamer, but they can still hold like hot liquids, and it kept it at temperature. And we tried to pour over side by side. We did one at 205, one at 212. And like we all kept the same opinions. We're like, this one is better. You're wrong. But it's always the back and forth.
We have learned nothing from this.
Yeah. We've only learned that we're stubborn.
I think the 205 thing for me is because I'm a bit insecure when it comes to like jumping on trends. So if I see somebody like James Hoffman and he's like, 205 is what you should brew at, then I'm going to do it because I like that guy. He knows a lot about coffee. But then he himself was like, does it matter if you pull it right off the boil? He's like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know who to believe. And so I just kind of do what feels safe to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, I have done, if you have like a light roast coffee and you do it right off the boil, you're going to get great extraction.
Yeah.
So maybe don't do it with like a dark roast coffee. But
yeah, and like I typically will do dark roast on like French press. And so like then it's like sitting for a little bit.
Yeah.
That like
in immersion, I don't think it matters at all. Like I think you can take a boiling pot of water off the stove and just dump it in and it'd be fine.
Absolutely.
But for V60, which is like my go-to, definitely I'm a bit more careful because every little detail kind of matters. But yeah.
Absolutely.
Do you love French press? Are you a French press person?
If I have the patience for it, I'll do it. I also am more of a dark roast person. And especially like getting into cooler weather. I prefer dark roast. And the decaf that we have, I love decaf. I'm like a huge advocate for decaf coffees and for decaf being good. And like our decaf is a darker roast. And so I always gravitate towards that one. I love it.
Nice. Decaf does tend to be a bit darker too. I don't know what the deal is with that. Is it the processing or do you happen to have that answer?
Yeah, I feel like I don't have like the answer, but I do know that like it has to be related to the processing, that like you can just take it darker.
Mm-hmm.
And probably something in like, whether it's like an ethyl acetate decaf or a water process, that like, I feel like all of the ones I've had have just been a little bit darker.
Yeah. Every water process decaf has been darker for what I've seen. So I don't know.
Yeah.
We're going to ask the water process God if he knows.
Yeah.
Why is it all dark roast?
Yeah.
I think my friend has a Mexican decaf that he does not roast dark.
Yeah.
But I'm going to have to get a clearer answer from him because I've never tried it.
Yeah. And I'd be curious to try like a light roast decaf. Like if I ever saw it anywhere, I would totally buy it.
I would. Yeah, I definitely. Because light roast is like I'm a very third wave hypey person when it comes to coffee. So if they just gave me like raw beans with like a light sear on the outside, I'd probably drink it. Yeah. And it would just taste like green vegetal. But
yeah. I tried white coffee for the first time.
Okay.
Like a year and a half ago. I like couldn't find it anywhere at any shops down in Chicago. And I was just like, I want to try it because people ask me about it. And I happened to find it. My best friend lives in Stevens Point, Wisconsin, which is like, they've got a college campus, but like it's not a huge town and it doesn't have like a bustling coffee community, but they happen to have it up there. Like the least expected place. I was finally able to try white coffee.
What was it? What did you find?
It was very strange because have you ever had it before?
No.
Yeah. So white coffee is coffee that's dropped pre-first crack.
Okay.
So it's like been in the roaster for like a few minutes. I don't know like the roast curves. I don't know what temperature they bring it to, but they drop it pre-first crack. And because the beans are still like, they have all their moisture, you have to run a shot through it once, throw that water away, and then run a shot through it again. If you ever see like a picture of it, it looks like skim milk. It like doesn't even really look like coffee. It tastes like kind of earthy and grassy, not in like a matcha way, but in like a I don't like it way. I just like it's a strange experience. And like if you didn't know it was coffee, you probably wouldn't guess that it was coffee. But the big draw of it is that it has like truly like twice the caffeine of like a traditional espresso shot, because none of that water or less of the water is leaving the coffee beans. It leaves a lot more of the caffeine intact. I think Dutch Bros does white espresso shots.
That's very surprising to me.
That seems right. Yeah, absolutely. I was very surprised. And so like that's why people get it, because it has a lot more caffeine in it.
I mean, that makes sense. Yeah. Like the same people that go for what's that one Death Wish, like where it's just Robusto that's been like roasted to oblivion. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, to each their own. If you just want coffee, like a coffee like syringe like of caffeine. But
I respect it.
I mean, go for it. Go for it, right?
Yeah. It was a good experience to have, just trying white coffee, because people ask at my shop about it on occasion. And so if you have the chance, I'd say just to try it to know, but to not go on some like Odyssey-esque adventure trying to find it.
I may see if I can convince one of my friends to because one of my good friends runs a roastery here. And what I may do is ask him if he'd be okay with me taking like, a little 5-pound batch and throwing it in to see if he, actually one of the bags that I sent you, it's Balance. That's he's one of my best friends. But he will probably be like, that's stupid. I'm not going to do it. But maybe we could get I know, but I don't know. I'll put out feelers. So what are you drinking on your side?
Yeah, I just have our Stargazer blend. We always have it in all of our shops. It's just like a casual dark roast.
Nice.
It's just like easy. I don't always want like something with crazy tasting notes, especially when I'm still like getting going. I'm like, I just want coffee. So we're just going tried and true.
Nice. I always want weird coffee notes, unless I'm like sick or something. And then I'm like, I'm just going to do something comfy. But I am drinking the Bondowoso.
My baby.
I have been waiting. It's Indonesian from East Java, and it's super delicious. When I opened it and ground it, huge honey smell with, I tasted like some toasted almond, but it kind of came through like on a fruitier side. Super good.
Yeah.
That pear and honey definitely comes through. Unfortunately, I brewed it a bit early, so I'm keeping it in this little mug thing.
Yeah.
Which I hate, like the thermal trapping mugs.
Yeah.
Because I feel like it unnaturally keeps coffee warm and makes it taste weird. But it might be mental. It's good.
I'm glad you like it. That coffee's my baby. I'm obsessed with it.
So tell me what went into doing a light roast Indonesian, because I feel like a lot of the Indo-Chinese coffees, like Sumatras especially, people think that you got to really, really roast them. But I have also found that these lighter roasted, like Indonesian and even Sumatras, have such great character that you don't find like a lot. Yeah, I will say I had to do like a little bit of convincing of some of like my coworkers. I'm like, I want in Indonesia, because we've never had that origin, at least to my knowledge, at Brewpoint. That's kind of been like a small hobby of mine, especially this last couple months, of like trying to find new origins that we haven't explored yet. And like I was mentioning, I'm like, I really want to do this. And like there was some hesitancy from some of the people I'm around, like reasonably so. I'm still like a little new at all of this. And so I understand it. But yeah, I just like threw it on our little sample roaster, and it's not like super light. I was trying to avoid like too early of a drop, but it was like just on like almost the gradient into medium. And I think that because it's a naturally processed coffee, that I think that like naturals you can bring just like slightly darker than you think you can. That like leaning less into like that intense brightness. And I think it keeps that coffee like more palatable to people who aren't super familiar with like natural processes, or like don't lean towards like super light roasted or super acidic. That it just felt like a really accessible coffee, and it made me really excited to be able to like talk to our baristas, and like everybody who tried it was like, oh, this is like really good. Like a little bit of surprise. I'm like, yeah. I tried to tell y'all.
Yeah.
It's a great coffee. I think it has some nice traditional character to it, but that natural kind of, fruitiness does come out really well. And it's not like an over complex coffee, but it's definitely, like you said, it's a nice intro for your more traditional or old school kind of people. So great job. Kudos.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for sending me this coffee. I was super happy. I love getting little care packages from people, because I like to see like what, if they stamp the box, or like what kind of little notes they send. I was super happy to get it. And I love the bag is really nice. You can't see it.
Yeah.
People on Instagram will see it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a nice little branding. Super cute. So you've been at Brewpoint for how long?
Yeah, I've been at Brewpoint for about 3.5, almost 4 years.
Okay.
But I've worked in coffee for 5 years. I did a year at Starbucks before jumping into specialty coffee, but I've been at Brewpoint for almost 4.
Well, I've said this before that Starbucks, I think a lot of the specialty coffee and third wave community owes Starbucks a debt of gratitude for, first of all, introducing the States to kind of what specialty coffee is trying to do, or they were trying to do what specialty coffee is. But we have an entire generation of baristas because of Starbucks culture. And it's great.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And the location that I worked at wasn't like, it was technically like a licensed store. So like it was on a college campus.
Okay.
So it was the Starbucks name without all the Starbucks perks.
Right.
And I just knew, I'm like, I enjoy this. I enjoy the craft of it. And I know that things are better somewhere else. That here I'm just kind of a cog in the machine, but like there's better and more out there, for which I'm like grateful for. And that like the location I was at was stupidly busy because it was a college campus.
Right.
And so kind of going through that first, the like true insanity, to then get to something that's like, we're still busy. It's just a different busyness. But yeah, I'm appreciative of my time there.
How long have you been roasting?
Yeah, I want to say 3 years. I started at Brewpoint in like March of one year and then started roasting right in October.
Nice.
And so I got into it pretty quickly and just like, I don't know, it feels like it comes off like I'm saying it just to say it, but it is really just a great environment. That's why I've stayed at Brewpoint for so long. Just the guys I learned to roast under and the people that I've learned coffee from, have just been so willing and wanting to share it with me and not like really helping me. Like, I think like the analogy of like, if there's not a spot at the table, like bringing up your own chair, that like we're bringing up a chair with you, and really investing in me. When I just like, I'm like, I worked at Starbucks, but I want to learn how to roast. But there was never like an eye roll. There was never like an okay at some point. Yeah, everybody there really invested in me and has just been a really great growing and learning experience over there.
That's awesome. In the coffee community, I think you get both sides of the spectrum. You can get very pretentious or, gatekeepy kind of people, but then you get people like at Brewpoint where they're like, we'll turn whatever coffee knowledge you have and like really shape that into something that's going to be great and help you grow. So I'm very grateful for people like that as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you want to learn to roast while you were at Starbucks, or what kind of piqued your interest in that side of it?
Yeah, I was definitely just more curious about like what else there was. We weren't supplied with a lot of like educational materials at Starbucks, which like purposeful or not, like it's fine. Yeah. But yeah, I really value learning a lot. That really drives. I just want to know as much as I can about something. And I had hit a dead end at Starbucks within the year. And I just wanted to learn more. And I knew that I just had to seek out where to find more from. And so I wasn't necessarily interested in roasting, but just interested in learning about the rest of it.
Awesome. And Brewpoint is a woman-owned business as well.
Yeah. Melissa's a woman and a woman of color also.
Yeah. I read a little bit on the website, which I think the whole story was that she was looking for a coffee machine online or something.
Yeah.
And ended up buying like a coffee shop.
Yeah. Yeah. She was looking for an espresso machine and saw the shop for sale. And like also the story is that like she's married to her husband now, but they were just dating. And it was very much like, we're just going to do it and see what happens.
At least she had somebody with her to be like, let's just do it. Let's just go. It always takes the one enabler to be like, just do it.
Yeah. And her family is great. Her parents come around the shop every once in a while, like especially for like bigger events that we host. And her parents are just super encouraging. And so she really did have a lot of people in her corner, and like, it shows that she really has a really strong support system that she is now like supporting the rest of us from.
So did she have any kind of coffee industry experience before?
I want to say not much.
Okay.
Yeah. And just kind of
such a daunting task.
Yeah. Yeah. And like she So one of the roasters that I learned under Ben, he started their roasting program, and it was also kind of like learning it as we're doing it. Yeah, like definitely super daunting. Yeah.
I think that the coffee community is really great. I don't like calling it an industry. I mean, it is, but I like the word community because when you find people that you can learn from and like bounce things off of, that's really what the whole coffee world is about, is just sharing, like knowledge sharing. So I think that probably Chicago has a great scene where if you hit up like another roaster or if you're a fan of another person in town, you can, usually hit them up and say like, hey, I really like this coffee you did. Can you give me some pointers?
Yeah.
So I'm glad that you guys have been able to grow like that as well. That's awesome.
Yeah. And like something else super cool that I get to be a part of, we essentially like rent time on our roasting machine to other smaller roasters. And so there's like, I want to say we're at 5 or 6 like smaller roasters that'll like cycle through. Like I get to see a couple guys for like 2 hours a week and get to like pick their brains about like what they're doing, like where, because they use different importers than us. And they're getting different things. And we were like having a problems with one of our decafs, and what this, his name is Devin. Devin and I was like, what are we doing? Like, how are we both just fighting this decaf right now? And so that's been really good to just like have that community and be able not only just to have it, but to be able to host it feels really meaningful. That like we are also a gathering place for other people in the industry that is like super valuable and important, not just on like a like existing in capitalism level, but on like a human level, that like we're all in the same industry, but we're all in it together, not just to compete, but to do the best that we can.
Right. I'm such a fan of that, like that there's room for everybody, and like kind of getting rid of this whole like, I hate gatekeeping and elitism within music, but also within kind of any niche or like subculture, which I think that coffee is definitely, when you get deep enough into it, is a subculture of its own.
Yeah.
But like you said, hosting people, having that space and just, giving people free reign, like whatever you need, like we're here for you.
Yeah.
And vice versa. I'm such a fan of that. Gassing up your friends. That's what I'm all about.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
What are some of the challenges that you have faced in the coffee community, whether it's like learning roasting or whether it's been coffee availability or like economics? What is one big challenge that you see like for Brewpoint in the coffee world?
Yeah, I think something that I've been trying to balance lately is wanting to explore more like direct trade or like smaller trade relationships and more intentionality behind that. But also like there's a bigger price tag that comes with that. And that like, even though I find value in that, and like Melissa finds value in that, and my other coworkers find value in that trying to communicate like a higher price tag on a bag of coffee to customers, that trying to communicate like these extra $4 to you translates to the rest of this on the other side of the world, that like trying to have a balance of still being able to reach our customer base, and still like being able to get bags of coffee out the door so we can keep investing in these communities. And just like wanting to invest more in direct trade. And I've been meeting with this gentleman, his family owns coffee farms in Brazil, and he's like trying to break into direct trade. And I'm like, I would love to be in this with you, but I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to guide this, and I don't have the bandwidth right now to guide this. But yeah, trying and really wanting to pursue more direct trade and more ethical and sustainable coffee sourcing. And like that, I feel like is the tension. And cause it's like, it's easy to buy from big importers. Like it's just the website, and then it shows up at your door 3-4 days later. And like, it's trying to balance like the ease and the like knowing that if we pay so much for the green, people will pay this much for the roasted coffee, but then going out on a limb, and it's like, where is that line where people are not willing to engage anymore?
Yeah. A couple of other people I've talked to have raised that concern as well. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with Memoirs and he's like around Knoxville.
I think, because did you have him on?
Yeah, I had him on recently.
Yeah.
But Rich, he tries to do a lot in creating sustainable and meaningful relationships with like coffee importing and things like that. And his price tag is definitely on the higher end because he's doing like, I think 20% over like the value or something like that. So he's trying to invest as much as he can to help like the producers and everyone down the line. But that's definitely a much smaller operation than what I think Brewpoint is doing. So his overhead, is at a certain level. And but yeah, coffee economics is something that's fascinating to me. I'm low key debating going to school just so that I can learn more about like economics in that sense, because I see that as such a huge challenge, like the global economics, and then like in the US, what people think is fair compared to what is actually fair. Yeah, is such a hard, it's such a hard concept to navigate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thanks for really sharing that, because I think every time I have a coffee person on, I really want to know what's something that we should be aware of as coffee consumers, and people that just go and buy our coffees or buy bags or whatever level of enthusiasm that we're at. People should know what's going on, like what it takes for that bean to make it to their cup.
Yeah.
And so thanks for that.
Yeah.
I saw that you do roller derby.
Yeah.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how violent are you as a person? No. Give me a little backstory on that.
Yeah. So the league that I skate for currently, we're technically a new league. We're a merged league. We're Chicago Outfit and DuPage Derby Dames.
Nice.
Both teams kind of met I think they met twice, but the big meeting was as we were moving out of the pandemic.
Is that air quotes?
Yeah. When we could safely return to play. There's like a governing body over roller derby that was like really, really strict about when we could return to contact play. And so as we were moving into being able to actually have practice and have games again, both teams kind of met and were like, we don't have enough people for 2 leagues and we're both going to fold unless we do something about it. And Chicago Outfit they existed for a really long time. I had skated with them 5 years ago now. I did about 1.5 years. And just like, because life, I stepped away for a little bit. But also DuPage Derby Dames, I want to say they were also around for a little over 10 years. And yeah, it was just like I wasn't at the original meeting, but like hearing about it, it was a very humble and just loving meeting of like, we all love this sport so much and we want to keep playing. It is a wonderful community. It's so great. And it's so inclusive of everyone. Like there is a role that everyone can play, that like, even like there's people like, I can't roller skate and I'm afraid to. That's like, there is 30 different non-skating things we need to happen.
Right.
That like, there's room for everyone. And it isn't even just like, come as you are. It's like, no, we love you exactly where you are. And we're going to be in it together. I was just talking to my teammates yesterday about like, what about the sport is different? And there is really just like, you're just in the hardness together, that there's not an aspect of like, I'm not good at the skill, so I'm going to work on it alone. That like, because roller derby is such a team sport, that no, we're going to work on it together and we're going to be in it together. And I cried at practice on Wednesday and my teammates were like, we're going to keep working on this. And if you need to take a break, we can. but we're going to keep going because you can. Not like, we're going to keep going because we don't care how you feel. It's like, no, we know you can keep doing this. And and like the sport is fun. It's a great time.
I remember going to some matches back in Savannah. We had the Derby Devils. I don't know if they're still around, but shout out Derby Devils. And it was always such a great time. The atmosphere is so fun.
Yeah.
I think we were talking earlier where if there's like some chance that a fight could break out in the sport, you're going to want to watch it. And so that's what I always found really fun, that it was like such a bruiser sport. It's sick.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, I will say that in modern Derby, like fist fights don't happen.
Right.
Like it's honestly very similar to the coffee community. Also, I realized I didn't say my league's name. We're Chicago style roller derby. And it's very similar to coffee. I would say that like, it's a community. We're all in the sport because we love it. Like, unless you're like a top 10 team, like none of us are getting paid. We're just doing it because we love it. Like we're adults playing a high contact sport just for fun. And like, especially moving out of the pandemic, it's like, we're all in it because we love it. Which is great that like there's teams like you're playing against, but there's times where it's like, that was a really good hit. Like that was a really great play. And you can just like, be like, yeah, you're doing great. And you're like opposing the team. That like, it really is a really good community all around.
Yeah. It looks like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I'm probably not going to play, but I definitely enjoy watching like roller derby. And I know like it's not similar to hockey, but it kind of has that same kind of vibe around it, like the culture of it with more teeth.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's anything like that in Montreal. I guess somebody send me a message on Instagram if there is.
So it's funny. We just hosted, Montreal Roller Derby, their team is so good. We just hosted, So we hosted, her name is Miracle Whips. She's like one of the best. So one of the positions in roller derby is a jammer. That's who scores points. Miracle Whips she's an incredible skater all around, but she's a really good jammer. And we hosted a clinic with her, like, I want to say a month and a half ago. And so it was just really funny to learn that like, that's where you're at. I'm like, oh, we just had Miracle Whips here.
I've got to figure out where they play then. Cause that's probably fun to watch.
Yeah. And like, especially, a lot of leagues are like hosting games again. And not just like, there was a lot of like closed scrimmages where teams would play each other, but you can have spectators. We're definitely moving into a place where like there are games happening that people can go to. Montreal Roller Derby is super good.
Cool. Yeah. Sounds, I'm going to check it out then.
Yeah.
You also like to do show photography.
Yeah, I do.
I checked out some of the photos. It looks like y'all have a great like scene going on in Chicago. Shout out the Second Wind. I just learned about them because you put some photos up. What do you find? I find it fascinating watching show photographers and then seeing how the camera, like the photos come out afterwards. But like adjusting to the conditions, you have zero control over lighting. There's moshing happening, and stage diving and all kinds of stuff. What do you find is the hardest thing to do in that, getting these great photos? What do you, I don't even know where to start with that.
Yeah. I would say that the hardest part is always the lighting.
Okay.
That's like the lighting is always so unpredictable. And I like all around, like going to shows, just to like be there or photographing them. I hate strobe lights. It just like messes with me. And so having to shoot a show where it's like strobing, I'm like, this isn't fun anymore. But like everyone is great. Like all the bands that I've been photographing, are just like super respectful. The boys in Second One are great. And they're just like those guys and some of the other bands that I've been photographing that like, they're just excited to like have someone doing pictures that like, they're just like, they want it to work for all of us. And like, even like people at shows, like even if they're moshing or like they're passing a crowd surfer that like, they're like, oh, they've got a camera and we're going to like keep things contained a little bit. I was shooting a show. It was like, I was there for Phineas, but there was like a few other bands. And there was this guy like kind of in front to the side of me. And there was like a moment of like getting annoyed that he like kept putting his hands up until I realized he was like throwing crowd surfers away from me so I could get pictures. And at that point I'm like, oh, I see what's happening here and I appreciate it.
Yes.
But I do think that like the chaos of it is kind of a draw for me. I joke that I have half of a photography degree. I like did half of schooling, and art school just kind of steals your soul out from under you.
Yes.
And I had to take a break because I just wasn't enjoying photography anymore. And then I stepped into it again within the past couple of years, that like not being so in control, that like I've done like family portraits before, or like just like personal portraits. I photographed a good friend of mine's wedding, which like was rewarding and I loved it, but like I have too much control.
Right.
Like there's too much is on my shoulders, that doing show photography, so much is out of my hands that like if photos end up like grainy or like there's a little bit of a blur, it's like I did my best. I did what I could in the environment, and I so much more enjoy like candids and like really like capturing how it's happening, not just like that. Like, I think there was like a little bit of hesitation at some of these shows, like some of the guys, because of the pandemic, hadn't played shows before. And there was like a moment of insecurity of like, oh, I have to like be a certain way or like look a certain way. And it's like, no, just like, I want to capture how you are experiencing this right now.
Right.
And that's been super rewarding. And like, I've had like people reach out afterwards and it's like, I've never been on stage before. And like seeing those pictures made me feel so cool. Like I've never seen myself that way. That like is so rewarding. And it's like, I love that you feel comfortable telling me that. So it's like, I love it.
Yeah. Show photographers are like the heroes of the scene, especially like when I was in my like, you know, early bands, like in high school and stuff. And it was always like, if we knew there was a photographer there, we would always try to be friends with them because they're going to make us look great. And they're probably going to do the most for our band because our recordings are shit. So, so if you have good photos, you know, on your Facebook or MySpace, God, if anybody remembers that, then like, you know, that's like what's going to do it for you. And then maybe you can play enough shows to pay for better recordings. But usually if you have a show photographer, all they want is a photo credit, and you tell like your other friends, and when you get some change or get some money, then you can pay them to do your cool, like, you know, outdoor dressy shots. But they were always the heroes in the scene, and they made bands look way better than we actually sounded. So I've always had such like a respect seeing like a show photographer like in the middle of like there's like a stage diver coming over their head, but they get that shot. So I've always wondered, how do y'all deal with that? It looks scary. It's chaos. And I learned at a recent show that like people can't always see the camera because I wear all black and I've got a black camera strap and a black camera, that if I just like hold it above my head, people part like the Red Sea. That like, oh, there's a camera. There's a piece of equipment that is probably $1,200. Yes.
Don't want to touch it. And so kind of waving it around a little bit. But also just like being like aware, and like when I like the shows that I photograph are shows that I would be going to anyways. But like I listen to that music. I'm not like stepping into a world that I am unfamiliar with. And I've like joked before that like I've said that I've never fallen in the pit. And people are like, oh, you know, whatever, I don't believe you. But I'm like, I play roller derby and I'm solid. And that comes in handy for photography. I like brace myself, and people are like, oh, yeah. This is a person that is familiar and in the industry and like in this world. Like they're good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have a shout out for any of the bands that you've recently photographed that people should know about?
Like, you beat me to it.
I'm
like,
sorry.
Yeah. It's just like all the Second Wind boys are great. But the frontman Dane and I are really good friends. Mm-hmm. They're super fun. I love their music. From a similar, so they did a show back in May where it was like 4 or 5 local bands that Far Under played. Okay. I know that they're like moving some stuff around, and I know that the Second Wind boys are moving some stuff around. But Far Under is doing super cool stuff. I haven't seen them in a few years, and it's like slightly bigger than those boys, but like Belmont was super fun to shoot. Mm-hmm. I photographed them in this it was like a party room at a bowling alley.
Oh, that's cool.
It was like my sister and I was photographing them for one of my photography class finals. And they were super great. And it was just a really fun show.
I recently saw them with Kubla Khan and Stick to Your Guns.
Yeah.
And Belmont is not like a band that I listen to, regularly. I'm very familiar with their sound and everything, but seeing them live, they were one of the tightest bands I've ever seen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so much energy.
Yeah. They're super fun. I am really bummed. That tour came through Chicago, mm-hmm. and I'm super bummed I didn't get to go. I'm still not 100% comfy going to shows alone. Mm-hmm. And I'm especially I love Kublai Khan, but I don't know if I want to be there by myself.
Hey, it's fun. If you go by yourself, you just keep a low profile, sit in the back.
Yeah.
You can look cool. You just keep your arms folded.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the move.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But that was such a fun show. I'm bummed bummed for you that you didn't get to see it.
Yeah.
Well, Haley, this has been a lot of fun. I appreciate you sharing all about the coffee and about roller derby. That's a first for the podcast. Thank you so much. I just have one last question for you before we wrap it up.
Yeah.
What's your favorite city for beans and breakdowns?
I was thinking about this one. I'm biased to say Chicago, mm-hmm. but I will say that what I would consider a really underrated coffee scene is Columbus, Ohio. Mm-hmm. I've been to a couple of shows out there, not necessarily metalcore shows, but they've got the venues I've been to have been super cool. But their coffee scene is incredible. They're doing super cool stuff out there, and people make fun of me when I say that I love Columbus, Ohio, because it's Ohio. But yeah, I love it out there. So that would be my answer.
Hey, Ohio gets a bad rap. Columbus is definitely not Akron. So
yeah.
And I say that as somebody who's part of their family lives in Akron. So yeah. I can tell you firsthand, Columbus is better.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Give me your favorite shop from Columbus.
Yeah, I love the Roosevelt. They do a lot of nonprofit work. Mm-hmm. They end up doing an end of year write up of these are the amount of wells we built or how much clean water we provided. They have the receipts for the work that they did. Yeah. And their coffee is phenomenal.
That's great.
So I love the Roosevelt.
See, that's a coffee shop after my heart when they'll put out their entire financial statement and show mm-hmm. you exactly where the money you spent went.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. A coffee shop I did want to name drop in Chicago that they're new to having a storefront. They're called Coffee, Hip Hop, and Mental Health.
Ooh.
They are non-for-profit. It's pay what you can, and they fund specifically Black people in the community to be seeing therapists. Their owner, Christopher, is amazing, and he's mm-hmm. I could have really benefited from this. And so they give scholarships for people in their community to see therapists, and then they host group therapy in the shop. Nice. That they'll send out, they'll choose a hip hop album that everybody will listen to that week. And then they have a therapist on site to guide the conversation. And they're just doing super incredible work.
That's awesome. I mean, that's mind blowing to me. So
yeah,
that's such a great use of the coffee community and to bring people together like that. That's awesome. I'm going to have to look into that because that just made me super excited.
Yeah, absolutely.
But Haley, thank you so much for hanging out on a Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, thank you.
I hope that everything keeps going great with Brewpoint and your roasting career and everything. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Beans and Breakdowns. I want to say a huge thanks to Haley for hanging out on the podcast. It was such a fun time talking about roasting and roller derby. If you're interested in anything that Haley's working on, please check the links in the description. I'll put links to the roller derby stuff, some of the photography, and especially Brewpoint Coffee. If you've enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe and leave a review. You can also find out more information about the podcast by following us on Instagram at Beans and Breakdowns and on the web at beansandbreakdowns.com. Until next week, stay caffeinated and wake the fuck up.